Shabbat Shalom. Welcome, everyone. I hope that you're all doing okay and are able to find us and join us for our Shabbat service. We have a special service tonight. As you hopefully are aware, last night we began the month of Elul. And when we enter into the month of Elul, we've been trying to take advantage of the fact that it is an opportunity for us to begin the work that comes with the high holidays, where we turn inward, we are introspective, self-reflective, and looking not just at the things that we want to remember, but the things that perhaps we've forgotten or tried to forget. And so we have special liturgy tonight that will help us to prepare for the high holidays. And if you can go to, there's a website, the CCAR Flipbook, and I believe on your screen, it will show you that there is a Flipbook link. And so you'll just want to look online if you haven't found it yet for CCAR Flipbook, and it's Mishkan HaLev, and we are going to be following that. The words shall be up on your screen, but it may be easier for some of you if you might have eyes that have a hard time seeing, that perhaps it would be easier to do that if you have it open in another window. So we'll begin with Hine Matov, which you can find in Mishkan HaLev on page 10.
Hine matov u'manayim, hine matov u'manayim, hine matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov u'manayim, hine matov u'manayim, hine matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine, hine matov, hine, hine matov, hine matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine, hine matov, hine, hine matov, hine matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad.
Continue by lighting the candles for Shabbat. Or actually, go ahead, Courtney.
I invite you to light candles with me if you can. Join with me in the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
And for Elul, we turn to the words on our screen or page 6 in the flip book. Before the music of creation's majesty, let there be a silent praise of existence. Before the feast of sanctified words, let there be a poetry of solitude. Before we enter the palaces of prayer, let us find within ourselves a place of calm. Before we revel in the wondrous and sublime, let there be an honest inward gaze. We turn to page 7. Now is the time for turning. The leaves are beginning to turn from green to red and orange. The birds are beginning to turn and are heading once more toward the south. The animals are beginning to turn to storing their food for winter. For leaves, birds, and animals, turning comes instinctively. But for us, turning does not come so easily. It takes an act of will for us to make a turn. It means breaking with old habits. It means admitting that we have been wrong. And this is never easy. It means losing face. It means starting all over again. And this is always painful. It means saying, I am sorry. It means recognizing that we have the ability to change. These things are terribly hard to do, but unless we turn, we will be trapped forever in yesterday's ways. God, help us to turn from callousness to sensitivity, from hostility to love, from pettiness to purpose, from envy to the words on the next slide that seem to have been cut off. From envy to complete the prayer as is suited to you, as we continue with Esai 9, page 9.
Esai 9 harim me'ayin yavo Ezri me'im Adonai Use shamayim va'aretz Haitim lamot reglecha hayanu Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha al yad yeminecha, Yom HaShemesh lo yakecha, v'yavreach balayla. Adonai yishmorcha mikol ra, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor tzeitecha uvoecha me'ata me'ata ve'ad olam. And as we have already lit our candles, we now continue on to Sholom Aleichem, and invite you to join in singing with me. Shalom Aleichem, Malechei Hasharet, Malechei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malechei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bolechem l'shalom, Malechei Hashalom, Malechei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malechei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni l'shalom, Malechei Hashalom, Malechei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malechei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedkem l'shalom, Malechei Hashalom, Malechei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malechei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Mi Melech, Malechei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We continue together with the words of Chatzi Kaddish. Vitkadal Shmiraba Belma Divrachute Vilnik Malchute Bechayechon Uvyomechon Uvchayete Kobet Israel Bagala Bagala Uvizman Kariv Vehimru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevarach, Ve'halamulal me'almaya, Yitbarach, Yitbarach, Vishtabach, Yitnahar v'itramam v'yitnase, V'yithadar, V'yithalal, V'yithalal, Shemei b'kudasha, B'richu, L'hela mikol v'chata v'shirata, Tushbechata v'nechemata, Damiran be'alma, v'himru, Amen.
Please rise. We turn to page 26 if you are following along in the Mishkan Halev. There is no human being who does not carry a treasure in the soul, a moment of insight, a memory of love, a dream of excellence, a call to worship. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. We continue with the Baruch Hu.
Baruch hu et Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
On page 29, holy is twilight, the realm of in-between. And so our sages taught, pray in the moments when light and darkness touch. We are all twilight people, beyond categories and labels. May the sacred in-between of this evening suspend our certainties, soften our judgments, widen our vision. Let it illumine our way to the God who transcends all boundaries and definitions. Blessed are you, God of all, who brings on the twilight. Baruch atah Adonai hama'ariv aravim. We continue on page 31. Open up our eyes. Teach us how to live. Fill our hearts with joy and all the love you have to give. Gather us in peace as you lead us to your name, and we will know that you are one. Baruch atah Adonai ohev amo Yisrael, for you are blessed, the one who loves your people, Israel.
Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed. You may be seated if you were standing. And we continue together with the words of Ve'ahavta. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol vavcha v'chol nafshecha v'chol meodecha v'hayu advarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom levavecha V'shinantam levanecha, v'ribarta bam, v'shivtecha b'veitecha, uv'lektecha v'derech, uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha, uk'shartam leot al yadecha, v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha, uchtavtam al mizuzot beitecha uv'isharecha. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Adonai Elohechem Emet, page 38. Truth and faith, these are fundamental to our existence. God alone is their source, and we are Israel, a people of God. Our sovereign saves us from tyranny, redeems us from its violence through countless wonders, from its brutality through great feats beyond measure. We are Israel, a people of God, the giver of life, who would not let our feet give way, the maker of miracles for us against Pharaoh, of signs and portents in the land of Egypt, the one who brought our people Israel from its midst to enduring freedom.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות אוסף אלה, נורא תהילות אוסף אלה. מלכותך ראו בניך, בוקי הים לפני משה, זרי, זרי, ענו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
We continue on page 42. Bless our sleep with peace, Adonai, and awaken us to life when we rise. With power sublime, spread over us your shelter of shalom, and through your wisdom restore us, make us whole. Let your name proclaim your presence in our lives. Be our shield. Make us stronger than the enemies we face, illness and war, famine and sorrow, and stronger than the enemies in our hearts, wickedness and sin. Carry us to safety as on wings, for you are the monarch of grace, the sovereign of compassion. You are the one who cares for us and sets us free. Watch over us, we who go forth to life. Watch over us that we may come home in peace, now until the end of time. Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim. Blessed One, you spread over us a canopy of peace, shelter of shalom, over all Israel, your people, and over Jerusalem. We now continue on page 46. At the very bottom of the page. The act of stopping to refresh oneself by taking a breath is intrinsic to the experience of Shabbat. Renewing our souls on the seventh day is both life-saving and conducive to spiritual growth. Our sages believe that on the Sabbath we are endowed with a higher level of awareness, perhaps because we take the time to stop and breathe. Said Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, the Holy One gives an extra soul to a human being on the eve of Shabbat. When Shabbat leaves, the extra soul departs. The additional soul helps us leave behind the turmoil of the week and experience the joy of Shabbat.
I ask those that are able and willing to please rise for the Amidah. Adonai Sefata tiftachu fi agiti iratecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei HaKol, V'Zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, U'Mevi Geula Livnei V'neihem, Le'ma'an Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshiach U'Magen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham V'Zerat Sarah. Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechaye HaKol Atah Rav Le'Hoshia, Orit Atah, Mechalkei L'chaim B'chesed, Mechaye HaKol B'rachamim Rabim, Tomech Noflim V'rofei Cholim, U'matir Asurim, U'mekayem Emunato, L'shenei Afar, V'chamocha Ba'al Gevurot, U'mido Melach, Melech Memit U'mechaye, U'matzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'aman Atah L'chayot HaKol, Baruch Atah Adonai, Mechaye HaKol. Atah Kadosh V'Shimcha Kadosh, U'Kadoshim B'chol Yom Hallelujah Selah, Baruch Atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh.
You may be seated if you were standing, and we'll turn now to page 57 for a kavanah from the Elul Psalms. A year of your goodness, your crowning gift. Your paths grow lush with oil, drop by drop. Pastures for grazing thrive in the wilderness, and the hills are encircled with joy. Flocks of sheep clothe spacious fields, and the valleys wear garments of grain. Filled to bursting, they shout, they praise an exultant song of delight. We continue now on page 61. To shape the world anew. The sea pushes back off the shore, yielding to gravity with a sigh, not a leaving, but a letting go, a retreat into its own deep fullness. The sun relinquishes its hold on the sky, only to rise once more at daybreak. As the tide rolls back in, a different kind of letting go, an unspooling across the expanse, and we creatures of earth are granted a fresh start, a chance to gather the debris and shape the world anew. Wholeness is a kind of holiness, the stasis of perfection, but brokenness demands recreation, a churning cycle of endings and beginnings, the act of pulling hope and brightness from the wreckage, taking the jagged shards and making of them, if not wholeness, a new sort of sacred splendor.
Ritzei, Ritzei, Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu, Ve'hamacha Yisrael, U'tefilatam, Ve'avat Tekabel, U'tehi Ratzon Tamid, U'tehi Ratzon Tamid, Avodat Yisrael Amecha, Baruch Atah Adonai, HaMachazir Shechinato L'Tzion, HaMachazir Shechinato L'Tzion.
For all these gifts I received today, are air in my lungs, pulse in my veins, my restless mind alive and curious, awakening suddenly to beauty, for love in the memory of love, forgiveness when I didn't deserve it, another chance at life. Let my soul give thanks to you. Let me not forget your kindness. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulecha na'eh lehodot. Blessed are you, Adonai, whose kindness and goodness come to all.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Ki ata hu melech adon lechol shalom. Ki ata hu melech adon lechol shalom. V'tov beinecha levarich et amcha Yisrael. Bechol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. ברוך אתה אדוני המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום. We now take a moment for silent prayer and meditation and reflection. Use shalom b'mramav, uyase shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Yase shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Yahase shalom, shalom aleinu 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 ve'al kol Yisrael.
Shabbat shalom, everyone. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Grant Hallis. I'm the rabbinic intern here at Temple Israel, and part of my position is to give a sermon and lead Torah study every now and then. Tonight, I have the opportunity to share my insights about Parshat Shoftim, this week's Torah portion. In this portion, we continue to hear Moses give his final speech to the Israelites. He shares many important lessons, but I want to focus on two in particular. First is about the role of community in establishing a justice system. Moses instructs the Israelites to appoint judges to carry out righteous judgment. He then shares the principle of tzedek tirtov, or justice you shall pursue. In using this phrase, justice commands the Israelites to ensure their appointed judge is without corruption or favoritism. According to Rabbi Simcha Bunim of Pishcha, it also teaches us that a judge must always judge justly. This impacts all aspects of the case, beginning with how crimes are investigated and litigated, which is why we then learn there need to be at least 2 witnesses to carry out punishment for a capital crime. In a Torah commentary for our times, Harvey Field shows that clearly the issues of fair treatment in all cases was central to the Jewish court system of justice. Commenting of the Torah's command to appoint judges who will promote justice, the Sifri emphasizes the importance of appointing judges with expert knowledge of the halakha or law, and with records of unquestionable integrity, honesty, and rights behavior. All this is to teach us that it is up to the community to ensure we appoint individuals who will interpret our laws and run our court systems objectively and fairly. We must monitor them closely. Rabbi Simeon ben Gamaliel, then speaking to his generation around 100 CE, taught, "Do not ridicule or scorn the doing of justice, for it is one of the foundations of the world. For the world is balanced on 3 things, on justice, on truth, and on peace." I really like this quote because it teaches that truth, peace, and justice rely on one another. If one finds the truth in a scenario, then a correct or just outcome can be found. After that outcome is reached and the decision is made, there can be peace. The idea of justice having an everlasting effect on generations really jumped out at me. We have the responsibility to teach these values to our children so that they can pass it to their children and many generations to come. By teaching them, we know that we are doing all that we can to protect our children from injustice and corruption and to provide a social environment where they can flourish. And this responsibility must be passed down to every generation. We must keep that tradition going so that our actions reflect a positive light on others. There needs to be people in our world who interpret the laws for what they are, not for personal gain, not for political gain, and not for any other reason other than the honorable and just treatment of everyone. The second lesson from Shoftim that I want to highlight is the value of Baal Tashchit, which teaches us not to destroy the trees in the field, even if we are waging war against the city in which they are located. This section emphasizes the importance of the upkeep of the environment. This value is one that, even if we don't recognize how, will impact us all. Moses ibn Ezra expounded on this idea. He writes, "The life of human being derives from trees." As Fields notes, one does not destroy the environment because destruction of the environment results in self-destruction. We have a responsibility right now, every day, to take care of the world that we live in, or else it will eventually lead to our own destruction. If there is no natural environment left in the world, then there is no world for our children and their children to be able to survive. Whether we are the ones who directly benefit from taking care of the earth or not, our actions will determine the survivability of life on our planet. A perfect example of this is a well-known story of Honi HaMagaal, Honi the Circle Maker, and a carob tree. The story goes like this. Honi HaMagaal, a man who lived in the 1st century CE in the land of Israel, was out walking one day. He saw an old man planting a carob tree and asked, "How long does it take for a carob tree to bear fruit?" The old man answered, saying, 70 years. Much to Honi's surprise, he asks, "Do you expect to live long enough to be able to eat the fruit from that tree?" The old man chuckled and responded with, "When I came into the world, I found carob trees planted by others. Now I am planting new ones for my children and their children." The story is a perfect example of the cycle that can be started and continued by our actions. We do not need to expect to gain anything directly from our actions, but make sure that the actions that we take are the best ones for our children and our children's children. But what do the court system and the environment have in common other than being found in Parshat Shoftim? Well, they both do not happen on their own. Both justice and the environment must be safeguarded. If not, the future will be dark and our descendants will not have the opportunity to flourish like we know they should. We have a responsibility, not just to ourselves, but to our children. If our current generation is committed to maintaining a just society and a healthy physical environment, then we must also set the groundwork for generations to also care about it and call it their own. So how can we ensure that we are doing our parts? There are so many ways. Regarding establishing and maintaining justice, there is no time like the present. We have an election coming up in November. I challenge all of us to do proper research before voting. Ask yourself if the person that you are voting for will interpret the laws justly. Do they represent the values of justice that defy favoritism and bias? Will you feel confident that they will fairly defend what you know to be justice? Regarding the environment, there's a lot of little things that we can do that will collectively make a big difference. What if we all challenged ourselves to find at least one thing in our lives that we can do to take care of the environment? It can be starting to use a refillable water bottle, recycling, or simply just not littering. Even these changes might be inconvenient or perhaps maybe a little bit more expensive, but we must remember that it is not just about us. It's about a much larger commitment that we made generations ago to take care of our world for the generations to come. Shabbat Shalom.
And with words of Torah in our midst, we pause for a prayer of healing for those in need of healing of mind, of body, or of spirit. As a congregation, we pray especially this Shabbat for Lorna Kundert, Jan Berman, Jerry Butter, Robin Moore, Stephanie Noble, Gail Russick, Melinda Glovka, Jim Hedger, Mike Ammons, Helen Fine, Jeremy Wise, Paul Levine, Tracy Huddleston, Joe McKenna, Ellen Goodrich, Mark Romanowski, Jerry McDonald, Richard Lieberman, Joel Pinsker, Ralph Schwartz, Marty Sacher, Sandy Sapphire, Laura Holtzinger-Levin, Avraham Ben Avraham, Ron Levine, Jay Bainbridge, Chelsea Smith, Shava Etta, Rory Fleischler, Bernice Brandt, and Deborah Seidel. I encourage you to think in your hearts or say aloud from your homes anybody else who ought be in our prayers this evening as we continue with the singing of Misha Berach on page 77 or on the screen in front of you.
Misha Berach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misha Berach Imotenu Mekor HaBracha Avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai rofeh hacholim. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings healing to the sick. I ask that those who are able to rise as we turn to page 78 for the Aleinu.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו
Our thoughts turn to loved ones whom death has taken from us in recent days. As a congregation, we are in a period of Shiv'ah for Shirley Ross and a period of Shloshim for Ken Lotney, Maxine Weinberger, Sidel Ballas, and Emily November. And we recall those who died at this season in years past with the yahrzeits of Carmen Angel, Maureen Burke, David Cohen, Bernard Davis, Jay Dinhofer, Otto Farnbacher, Lillian E. Finn, Minnie Fishman, Marjorie L. Flagel, Harry Friedman, Henry I. Gliwitzer, Oscar L. Goldfarb, Bernard Goldman, Jeanette Handler, Florence Hathcock Boyd, David L. Herman, Nancy May Hollander, Simon Knoploch, Emma Liebensberger, Rachel Levinson, Rabbi Kalman Levitin, Fanny K. Margolis, Esther B. Meadow, Norman Miller, Leon R. Office, Walter Ullman, Ronald Predikin, Ida Rosenthal, Hannah Shiner, Boris Sokol, Benjamin Stein, Harold J. Stein, Saul Tandy, Samuel Tannenbaum, Molly Unger, David J. Weinberg, and Susan Wilkinson. There are other names that ought to be added or pronounced more correctly. I ask that you do so from your homes. As we turn for the words of Kaddish Yatom, Mourner's Kaddish on page 86. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'alma divrach hirute v'yamlich malchute, v'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye dechol beit Yisrael, v'agala uvizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehe shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam ulalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'it hadar v'it daleh v'it halal shemei dekudesha brichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran b'alma v'imru amen. Yehe shlama Rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imrumav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen. That their memories should always and only be for a blessing. You may be seated if you are standing as we turn to page 89. Return, Israel, to the one who takes you back in love. The shofar is sounded from the first day of Elul until the eve of Rosh Hashanah to signal the approaching days of awe. The sound of the shofar implores us to engage in cheshbon hanefesh, in accounting of the soul. And on page 90. The shofar sounds and I am awake. shaken out of the days of sleep. I see the truth. The day of judgment approaches. Soon we will stand before one who can't be flattered or fooled. Soon we will stand in the courtroom of conscience. Soon we will know the joy of beginning again. And as we I guess now this technically second day of Elul, though it's not quite sundown, so we hear the shofar, many of us for the first time, and we'll recite the blessing together on page 91. Some choose to rise for the sounding of the shofar. I leave that up to you at home. Baruch atah Adonai shomea teruah. Blessed are you, Adonai, who hears the sounding of the shofar. Tikiyah. Shivarim teruah.
Try this again.
Tikiyah. And I believe we will now turn for Kiddush and Motzi. Courtney, I will let you take Kiddush.
If you want to grab your fruit of the vine and join along in singing with me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'rotzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho v'ahava ufratzoni inchilanu, zikaron l'ma'aseh b'reishit. Ki hu yom techila l'mikra'ei kodesh, zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim. Ki vanu v'chata ve'atanu kirashta mikol ha'amim, v'shabbat kodecha ve'ahava uvratzon ilchalatanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat lechaim. Lechaim. And I'll go ahead and lead us in the singing if you want for Hamotzi. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. We give thanks to God for bread. Our voices rise in song together as our joyful prayer is said. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz b'tehavon. Amen.
Amen.
Shabbat Shalom.
And a Chodesh Tov, as we are now in the month of Elul. Thank you all for joining us, and I really hope that if any of you are not with many people tonight, since we are all still socially isolated, that you will join us in our Zoom rooms so that we can have a little bit of an Oneg Shabbat together and be able to say hello and wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom. So thank you, and Yasher Koach to Grant Hallis on his first Devar Torah for us. We all have learned something from him, and thank you very much. And as always, Rabbi Sobo and Courtney Cummings, the service would not be the same without you both. Beautiful job. So thank you so much. We're going to meet you over in Zoom. Shabbat Shalom.